At
They
what?
gave us a constitution. It gave us impeachment. They gave us the right to take a criminal element in the White House and put him up for indictment, finding out every one of his nastinesses. There's a majority in the Congress could do it. We elected that majority, but it's not doing it. See? We had an opportunity to turn the 2012 election and vote no count. Didn't do it. All I'm saying is, don't promise to do something later that you're not willing to do now. Because before you'll get an uncorrupt, pro-Constitution result out of a constitutional convention that will then be upheld by a pro-Constitution majority of the people, you're going to have to get rid of the anti-Constitution party system. The Republicans don't favor this Constitution. They don't support it. They don't care about it. The Democrats are out to destroy it, and the Republican leadership is helping them. You must destroy this party system before it destroys the country. And all your proposals will go to rack and ruin if you let this party system chew on them.
Now, I said we'd have a couple more. If the audience wants to continue to go on and the folks up here are willing to do it, I'll let it go for more time. So continue? Yes. All right, gentlemen here in the purple shirt. And just as an aside, if they're not following the rules now, what makes you think they'll follow the rules of the new Constitution unless it's what they want?
All right. I need to lay just a little bit of a foundation for this question. First, in order to understand it. In order to change the Constitution, there used to be the long, arduous process of constitutional amendments.
Yes.
Then they started putting in justices that had microscopic vision and could see things that no one had seen before. And so we had legislation, say, from the bench. But something of relatively recent origin has established a new precedence that troubles me. And in order to explain it, Sinclair Lewis and Alice Through the Looking Glass had Alice arguing with Humpty Dumpty about the definition of a word. Humpty had made ridiculous definitions for a word, and Alice said, the question is, can a word mean all these things? And Humpty said, the question is, who's in charge? And the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts began a new precedence when they declared that the definition of marriage was not sufficient, that it needed to be changed. And therefore, through redefining the word by their decree, by who was being in charge, made Massachusetts the first state to have legalized homosexual marriage. I can't say gay because I can't associate that with joy and happiness, but it's homosexual marriage. And
your question, sir.
And so the question is that since the Constitution and laws can be changed now by redefining words, it seems to me that this is very unsafe, and I wondered if any of you have any comments on that.
Dr. Jaley?
I think one of the things we have to recognize is one of the reasons the founders even took the Constitutional Convention and that assembly back to the consensus of the people is because they knew that was a major safeguard. The Constitution was debated in taverns and churches across America for many months before it was actually ratified. And that's because the consensus of the people was of these universal rights. We do not have that today. The real work that I see that we must do before we're able to have safety, because we can look at all the things that are there. The Congress already has the ability to restrict the appellate jurisdiction of the court. We already have the checks and balances, but nobody's picking them up. There's no courage to do it. We're at the level of interposition of the people, even beneath the states. And so I think the most important thing we can continue to do is disseminate information. We are at a point right now, looks hopeless, but across this nation, and more groups like this, we're at a point where we're coming close to the tipping point. The tipping point means all of a sudden there's an explosion of groups that find out about each other, studying the Constitution, studying the original intent, laboring through pieces of 8. You don't have any idea how many people are studying that book. You know what I mean? And there's probably more than Ed realizes that are studying it. More people that are studying it. We think it may even look more hopeless than it is. I'm praying for a massive tipping point of a revival among the people of God. Not just a revival of spiritual revival, that's critical, but a revival of knowledge, because I think that's where the interposition is going to have to happen. And if it won't happen now to hold our people on track, I agree, don't trust it with some other convention.
Just because he was there before you, gentlemen in the tie back there at the second microphone. And then to you.
Thank you very much for tonight. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was asked numerous times about the difference between the Democratic Party and the Socialist Party. My question to you is, explain to me the difference between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party or the Socialist Party with the current crop of people we have in there now.
Who wants the microphone?
Very quickly. Go ahead. The Socialist Party is the honest one.
All right. Gentleman here in front.
Right. My question is to Mr. Ed Vieira. It's how do we rein in, nullify, control the administrative law? It's how to neutralize administrative law.
How to neutralize administrative law. Yep. And that is the
One
final
way or
question
another.
of the evening.
It's a very complicated question because even if you're the President of the United States, you're going to be restrained by certain congressional statutes that have created these agencies. Now, you may very well be willing to bite the bullet and say, well, these statutes are unconstitutional for this reason, that reason, or other, and then you face the problem that if Congress is not with you, you're going to have difficulties, perhaps even impeachment. All right?
But this addresses, if you would, the fourth, if you would, the impending fourth branch of government, which really doesn't exist, the bureaucratic state. And so since they derive their powers from legislative law, something has to be done to it.
Well, I think what you're going to, I think there's a practical answer to this is that the mainstay of this system is the Federal Reserve System. That's what enables this whole system to operate because it's through the funny money process that they can fund it. All right? That's coming down. And then the question is, how do we respond to the circumstances that will obtain when it comes down? And it's coming down within my lifetime. I'm an old fellow, but I'm going to see it. I've been writing on this since the 1970s, but it's coming in my lifetime, and I think in the lifetime of everyone sitting in here, unless you die tonight.
One last word on that subject, because sometimes we think that there is something going to happen now, and I think that's what you're trying to say. Stop waiting for something to happen that's going to deal with this. We have reached the point where the only people who can save us are the people themselves, you. And you can't do it. Wait. No person you choose through the very corrupt system that is producing the problem will ever remedy the problem. And when they say so, some of them are naive and some of them are simply lying, but all of them are wrong. The only people who can save America are the Americans who get together, as happened in the American Revolution, through their committees of correspondence, which we can now technologize in very wonderful ways, if we're willing. But the first thing's going to happen, you're going to have to decide that that way of doing things that is ruining our country is no longer your way of doing politics. And the last proposal, a lot of stuff that's being talked about, I talk about it, Dr. Vieira talks about it, it's all not in the Constitution. It's all extra-constitutional. But so is the way that you're doing business as a people. We are now doing business as a people, as citizens of the United States, in a way the Constitution not only did not envision, but that the founders, especially one of the most prominent, Washington, utterly condemned. He predicted it and said that it would lead to our destruction. But it's what we have now. We don't have two parties. We have two wings of the same faction, and it is destroying us. They work in their own interest, not in the interest of our Constitution, not in the interest of our country, not in the interest of our liberty or our people. They won't stop. We must stop them. And the way we stop them is by letting them go. Don't deal with them. Don't work with them. If the people who are part of what we call the Tea Party movement had followed my advice in that regard in 2010, we'd be electing a Tea Party president right now. But they didn't. They worked within the Republican Party, and that party has betrayed and gone to war with them. You must stop this madness, or our country is already destroyed.
All right. Dr. Jaley makes his apologies, but he has to get himself and the students back. Dr. Vieira and Dr. Keys are still here. State Representative, Jack, did you want to ask a question too? Okay. Final question goes to State Representative Dan Itza of Fremont.
Wow.
Yes?
I would like to jump back almost to where we started, actually.
Who, by the way, has written a great book called States Have Rights.
No, states have powers. People have rights.
I'm sorry, States Have Powers. Thank you. Still a great book, even if I got the title wrong.
That said, going back to the question about delegate limitation, and it was not a question about limitation by the federal government, but limitation by the legislatures that actually send the delegates and would potentially have the power to recall delegates if they were errant. Inasmuch as delegates to a convention are ambassadors of the states and agents of the states, do you agree or disagree that the legislatures that send them have the power to limit what they discuss and recall them if they go off the reservation?
Oh, I agree that the legislatures have the power to do that. The question is whether that power will be effective. All right, those delegates that went to the first Constitutional Convention were limited ultimately by Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation that said all the states had to agree to any change in the articles. Notwithstanding Article 13, they came up with an entirely new constitution, an entirely new system for ratification. And what will happen if the same occurs here? Is someone going to go to this Supreme Court to say, oh, those delegates from these various states didn't follow their instructions, and therefore we're going to set aside Rexford Tugwell's new state constitution that is up for ratification by a referendum of the people of the United States? Is that what this Supreme Court's going to do? See, that's what interests me about a lot of these people who are in back of this Article 5 Convention of the States, or whatever they call it. They say one of the main reasons we have to do this is because the Supreme Court has gone beyond any rational interpretation of the Constitution. They're running amok, and we have to control them. And yet, in the final analysis, if their hopes break down and litigation ensues, what is the judicial body that's going to hear that case? It's the very people that say who are out of control. There's a certain circularity in their argument that leaves me cold.
The one other thing I'd say is two things that will be very different this time that people aren't thinking through. The first Constitutional Convention took place in what was a pretty well-observed privacy. They weren't in the public eye. Do you really believe that in our present circumstances, things that people say, there were some pretty tough and straightforward things that were said and proposed at the first Constitutional Convention that probably would have cost the individuals who expressed them a fair amount of trouble. Never got out until later. You think that'll happen now? Because I don't. I think that is impossible. The government has super secret stuff slipping into the hands of our enemies, and you think a political convention full of people eager to share information embarrassing to their foes are going to be a non-leaky sieve? I don't think so. So second thing, a Constitutional Convention is not an assemblage of objective experts who will be working in the better interests of America. We have an example before us in the founders of this country that was highly unusual in the whole history of humankind. that people would actually spend that much time, and most of them would not simply have made a catalog of their own interest and made sure they were served. Okay? That's what's going to happen at this one, because that's the way these people are now. That's how they've redefined our politics. That's how corrupt they have become. And they won't be able to resist it. And you won't be able to choose enough people to send to that convention who will resist it. Because in point of fact, you want the truth, I'll tell it to you bluntly. In our population at large, we don't have enough people to resist it yet all ourselves. So how do we expect to find people to do what we won't do ourselves? Point. Some of it isn't about, I think, nastiness. It's about the usual political trade-offs. I'll give you your religious freedom amendment if you scuttle that Second Amendment I hate. None of us really care about that because we're all mostly lawyers, and the Ninth Amendment and the 10th Amendment are a pure embarrassment to intelligent people who discarded them long ago. Only kooks and cranks like those amendments. We can get them out of here. Nobody will worry about it. Can't we all agree on that? Can't we remove that from the table? Finally, it won't be hanging about the necks and obstructing the progress of this country. And people who will represent Romney wing and Bush wing and Chris Christie wing and other rhino Republican wings of the convention, you think they're going to resist those proposals? Because I don't. Think it through in practical terms. They will horse trade away things that are absolutely vital to the fight we must make. And when they come out the other side, there will be no way for us to rally anymore because all the amendments that give us the opportunity to do so, all the provisions that give us the direct opportunity to do so, will have been modified and removed. You betcha. I would bet my life on it. What I won't bet is the life of this country.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending today's Constitution Day event sponsored by the National Heritage Center for Constitutional Studies. I guess I'll wrap it up by saying this. We are the ones we have been waiting for. Stop waiting for someone else. I am your ever humble master of ceremonies. It's been my honor and a privilege. Thanks for being here.
Croc TV.